Welcome and thank you for joining us. You're listening to the Beyond 50 radio program. I'm Daniel Davis. It's 2014, and as the bell rang, most of us probably had New Year's resolutions in line of how we're going to improve our lives for the new year. Forget about the fact that maybe you slipped up last year and the years before. We're going to go ahead and focus on moving from this point forward. But the point is what do we do with these New Year's Eve goals as we try to set them forth and find out what's really important? Perhaps maybe we want to explore another possibility of rites. That's right, of renewal. On the program today, we're going to be talking with a licensed and ordained interfaith minister who resides in Portland, Oregon. Her passion is helping people transform live events into magical memories through ritual and ceremony. In 2008, she founded a nonprofit ministry called Anam Cara Connections, and you can find that at anamcaraconnections.com. In Irish, Anam Cara means soul friend. I'd like to welcome to the Beyond 50 radio program today our guest, Kathleen Berrigan. Kathleen, thank you so much for joining us here on the program today.
Looking forward to it. It's sunny in Portland, Oregon.
It sure is.
A good way to start the new year.
Now, tell us how you started getting involved with the kind of work that you do.
Well, it's kind of interesting, Daniel. When I turned 40, 23 years ago, I didn't want the silly birthday party where everybody wears black and they give you, old people's thing. And so I just started drawing the number 8 because I'm born on the 8th of the month. And then I thought, in numerology I've heard 8 is the number of personal power. And I thought, maybe I'll invite 8 powerful women to come over and celebrate with me. And I did. And I asked them to bring me a small symbol of their power that they would like to give to help support me in that new birth year and new decade of being 40. Mm-hmm. And, what came together, Daniel, was incredibly magical. I was not in ministry school yet. I was a television producer with a live television and a long history in theater. And I just kind of put all those elements together and had an interesting reading for the close. I think we might have sung a song. And then each woman went around and said what personal power meant for her at her age. And these women were all different ages. And then they gave me these little symbols, and I put it on a stick as kind of a memory stick thing. And we all just sat there and went, wow, this is a really cool way to do a birthday. I didn't want presents. We didn't drink wine. It just came together just very beautifully. Well, then after that, a lot of the women who were there were like, well, will you do this for me, or I have a friend. And so I just started doing these ceremonies, not quite knowing what I was doing. And then this would have been the early 90s. I thought, maybe I better go get a book and find out about what this ritual and ceremony stuff is really about. Now, back then, there were only a couple of books in the bookstores. Now there are sections in bookstores.
It's amazing how many people have jumped on that, isn't it?
We want meaning, don't we, Daniel? The meaning of the new year, the meaning of the sunrise. I think we've lost touch. Partly with technology that was supposed to bring us closer together. Mm-hmm. I'm of the opinion it's driven us farther apart.
Mm-hmm. Well, take a look at people with cell phones. I have literally seen couples sitting in restaurants across from each other texting. Now, I don't know if they were texting each other, but they're not talking or looking at each other either.
Oh, no, my family just went on a vacation together, and all 4 of us, my husband and my 2 stepkids and myself, and they're in their low 20s. And all of a sudden I looked around, and they were all 3 on their cell phones. And so I took pictures of them on their cell phones to remember that powerful moment of being together. It's too easy, isn't it?
It is.
So my passion is about bringing ritual and ceremony into everyday events. I have done house blessings. I did a ceremony once for someone who was selling a small business to a new business owner, and we did a transfer like that. Of course, I've done many weddings, memorial services. I've done baby showers where we bring a symbolic gift to support the mother when she's in labor. And not just to play the silly games that we play at baby showers, but to bring more meaning into it. So you name it, I've probably done a ceremony for it.
Mm-hmm. Well, what's really important, too, is that we have tended to, I shouldn't say lost, but at least put aside or put away rites. You know, that there aren't that many rites of passage, especially in America. If you really take a look at rites of passage, you go from grade school to junior high to high school, you get your driver's license, you become of voting age, then you become of drinking age, which I don't see how any of those are really good rites. And I was just thinking about this the other day, Kathleen, as I was watching a wonderful film by John Borman called The Emerald Forest. And I don't know if you're familiar with this, but
I'm not.
It's a wonderful movie that came out back in the middle of the 1980s, and it's about I guess it's a contractor down there clearing some of the area of the South American forest. He's got a little 2-year-old boy that sort of gets called into the forest, and this man loses his son to the Amazon forest. And what happens is he gets taken on by an arboreal tribe, and that's how he gets raised to become the young man that he does. And that's when his dad finds him, is when he is in his young teens. He's literally becoming a man through, this tribe. Anyway, there is a point where they say it is time to kill the boy. And you think, we think of that literally. But what they're literally saying is we are killing what was once the boy, and now he will emerge as a man. It was a right. And I found that fascinating because I was looking back as I was growing up, and you see the adults congregating together. When do you get into the conversations as I'm growing up? I don't remember when it was, nor did I feel it, that moment that I crossed the threshold where now all of a sudden the adults were talking with me. Am I an adult now?
Oh, yeah.
And so that's what I mean by the rights and why those can be so very important, because they really help you put the old away for good.
Well, and I think, too, speaking from a woman's perspective, is females have some pretty obvious rites of passage, when our bodies change or a young girl begins to menstruate. And, men just kind of slide into puberty and slide into adults. So I've heard men say to me before, even my husband, is, I wish we had more of that. Well, I always say, get the guys together and do it. Don't wait for the women to do it for you, I was asked a number of years ago from a friend she was a single mom, and her youngest son was turning, I want to say 13. And she said, would you plan a ceremony for him? And I kind of paused, Daniel, and went, well, but I'm not a man. I don't know if I can do this. And so what I did was plan this ceremony, and then I turned it over to this young boy to invite the men he wanted to come draw him through this passage. And then his mom and I went out for coffee while the ritual was going on. And to this day, I don't even really know exactly, but I created a structure for them. That's what my passion is to create a structure of this is how you can do your own ceremony. You don't need me there to do it or somebody else to do it. But they're just some really simple steps, and as we'll talk about in a little bit, particularly with the new year, of how to begin something new.
Mm-hmm. Now, let's talk about that. A lot of people, they approach the new year with what are known as, the idea of putting away all the bad habits and doing all the right things, the resolutions. But, I think sometimes people joke with themselves a little too much, realizing, I know I'm not going to stick with this. So let's talk about New Year's goals versus the intention.
I know. Well, first of all, I hear people saying, I was so glad to see the calendar turn over to 2014. And I'm going, do you think 2013 is over for you? Turning your calendar doesn't make stuff that happened in 2013 go away. Well, here's the difference for me. I do understand the importance of setting goals, because a goal you can measure, right?
Right.
But through the dictionary, a goal says it's the object of a person's ambition or effort. It's their desired result. But if you look up the word intention, it says the aim that guides the action. So what I've been working with these New Year's Rites of Renewal, the 4 parts we'll go through in a little bit, is what is going to support me, guide me towards those goals. I still have goals, but what's going to guide me towards that? So here's a little story I'd like to share that I think illustrates it well. I found it on the internet a couple of years ago, and it was not attributed to anybody, so I don't know where it came from. But this is my version of it, okay? So the king is the greatest marksman in all of the land. and he's going through the forest with his men, and he sees 3 trees in a row with bullseyes on it and an arrow dead center in each of the targets. Now, the king is furious because nobody can do that. No one, not even he, can be that accurate. And he's saying to the men, find the man who did this, find the man who did this. Well, there was only a young boy there. And the king had the boy brought over, and he said, do you know who did this? And the little boy says, yeah, I did this. And the king says, that's impossible. How did you do that? And the boy said, I shot my arrow, and then I drew the target around it.
Hey, there you go.
Do you feel that? When I give talks on this, I mean, it's like this ripple goes through the audience of, oh. So I say, if I don't know what my arrow is, you know, my guiding principle, I'm just going to be running around looking for targets. So by creating a word of intention for the year, one word that is going to guide you through the year, you know what your arrow is. Does that make sense?
I think it does, but give us a little clarity on really what that means for our listeners.
To set an intention, it's what's going to, I'm going to continually go back to this word all year long. In fact, I have a prayer practice every morning, and I use it in my practice every morning. Should I give you an example?
Yes, please.
So this last year, well, I've been doing this for about 13 years. So this last year, my word has been action.
Okay.
Now, what's going to happen when we claim a word, we're going to get all sorts of opportunities to look at where I've taken action, where I'm reluctant to take action, or where I'm ignoring. Because the light and shadow of the word will show up. So this was the year I have been working on a book for 6 years, and this is the year that I self-published, because I told myself either you're going to do it this year or you're going to rip it up and throw it away. But I had that word, and I used it in affirmations every single day. I call it divine right action.
Okay.
That I take divine right action today. I am guided by Spirit to take my divine right action today. So I use the word literally every day for a year. And it gets so embedded in me. Sometimes I sing it. I make little songs about it. And it's given me the opportunity to look at, nope, this is not my action to take, you know? Mm-hmm. There have been a couple of things this year that I finally said no to because it was not mine to do, but I was floating with it, you know? Floating energy is just not good, you know? So does that explain it a little bit?
It sounds like it did. So in taking action, you kind of had a consistent way to weigh and measure at a particular crossroad, I guess, on certain things, on what you should have done next. Which, with a goal, you can kind of be, I guess, a little more elusive with yourself, I guess. Does that make sense?
Well, I think a goal, quite honestly, I think it sets us up to fail. Because it's so finite. A number of years ago, I went to Weight Watchers, and they were like, oh, you have to set a goal. And I went, no, I'm not going to. I'm just going to work the program. I'm going to do what works for me. And I had about 50 pounds to lose, which I actually did. And I didn't pay attention to the scale. I just moved forward with, you know what, I'm looking back. My word in that year, the word was allow.
Allow, okay.
Allowing. Imagine your life if every day you set an intention, you pulled out your arrow, and said, I'm going to look at the word allow. Can I allow this to unfold? And then sometimes it's like, no, I cannot allow that. I'm going to make a change. So by having that word to support me of allow, I'm just going to allow the pounds to come off. I'm not going to say by when or what number on the scale I'm going to go to. And you know something kind of interesting? When I lost the 50 pounds, I told the leader that, and by the way, that leader of Weight Watchers was really into like ceremonial stuff. She had it, and I told her I was going to scream if I ever met my goal. Well, I'd step on the scale, and it was the number that I eventually aimed towards, and I let out this scream, and then you get to say, what was your success? What helped you get to your goal? And I said, because I set an intention to allow it to happen.
Ah. You know, Kathleen, I can't help myself here, but this is very refreshing stuff that I'm hearing here.
Yeah.
Goodness gracious, I've actually talked with just about almost all of the big self-help gurus you could name out there, face-to-face, one-on-one for hours. And earlier last year, I did a really enjoyable segment, everybody likes affirmations. They believe they work. But the funny thing is how our mind tricks ourselves into sometimes not being successful when it comes to affirmations, because a lot of times we just don't believe they're true. For instance, many people, I'm sure, for this new year, setting the goal, let's say. Let's not use intention in light of how you're bringing it up here. But so the affirmation could be, for instance, that you want to build wealth. I am wealthy, okay? You can just see the subconscious mind go, oh, really? Show me what evidence you have. You know, you got this bill, you got the IRS coming at you, but you go ahead and keep saying that. I know you don't believe it, but go ahead and say it anyway because you think it's going to work. Anyway, in light of that, there was a guy that comes along, and we did this interview, and just the genius of what he was presenting was called an affirmation. And what you do instead of an affirmation is that you ask a question such as, why is money coming so easily and effortlessly to me? You see, and I found that funny because I thought, you know, he's so right. How could the mind, what it's going to do is then find a solution to the question you're asking it rather than denying the reality you're giving it. Does that make sense?
I love a twist on a word like this.
Yes.
I actually had this experience years ago when I was single and going to this church, and, you know, of course it was the problem with men. The problem wasn't with me, haha. And she gave me this affirmation that I am married to my holy, wonderful partner. And I was supposed to say it out loud and put it all over my house. Well, I am driving over the river in Portland one day over the big Fremont Bridge, and out loud, Daniel, I'm like, I am married to my wonderful partner. No, I'm not. It's a lie. There's no one in the car. This is BS. And so when I went back to her and I said, you know, this just doesn't work. So what she helped me with is she said, what if you put in the word willing? I am willing to be partnered in a healthy, dynamic, spiritual way.
Mm-hmm.
You hear the difference in that? Because when we say I am, you know, like you say, the mind is going to go, no, you're not. I can't say I'm thin and I weigh 115 pounds. My mind goes, no, you're not. You know?
And so there you go. And that's why I was bringing this up, Kathleen, is that, you know, when you talk about intention and you set a word, you know, you can see how and as you said, each day you integrate that into your language of prayer, whatever it is, however a person ritually starts their day. It could be in the shower. Say, today I allow, as it was in your case, this to happen. And you weigh and measure whether that's the action you're going to take. That's really fascinating.
And see, let's take the word allow. In those months that year I was working with that word was just, I allow my body to be the healthiest it can be. Now, that didn't say I'm not going to eat chocolate today. You know, it's just I'm going to allow my body to be, and therefore I will make informed choices. But remember, an intention by definition, it's the aim that guides us.
Right, okay.
It's the aim that guides us. And I always say this, too, be very careful of the word you choose. So the way I found out about this was a number of years ago. I had a friend that we used to work at a publishing company together, and she's an editor and, you know, an English major. And every year she said she chose a word that would just be, it would inspire her writing every year. And I went, oh, well, that's kind of interesting. One word that will inspire your writing for a year. So I said, what was your word this past year? And she said, expansion. And I went, oh, well, what expanded? And she said, my butt. Laughed. She was being silly, but we do have to be careful about what we're affirming. Because both sides of it will show up. We will get the opportunity to look at that word and how it shows up in the light and in the shadow. Now, see, in allow, that can be surrender, that can be welcoming, but allow can also be just to let people walk over me.
Right.
So it a word of intention helps me discern day by day of what is my aim today, what is my focus today. The goal may be to lose 50 pounds. Great, that's a great goal. But what's going to get me there, Daniel? Yes, exercise, diet. I mean, the newspaper is just covered with that right now, along with the statistics about how quickly goals fail and resolutions fail. And I think that's partly because only a part of us is going into that new intention. So like we said, when people turn over the calendar and they think they're done with 2013, well, there are ways to ritualize that to be in right relationship to 2013. You know, I can't make things go away that happened, but I don't have to drag them around as a story. I don't have to ignore them and allow that bad experience to pop up. But through ceremony, we can come into relationship with that. And that's, again, is my passion, is about how to create ritual and ceremony that will support us in that.
Now, speaking of ritual, now I understand that you have led a total of, I believe it's 9 tours out to sacred sites in Ireland. Now, tell us why the interest in the Celtic, and there is a lot of rites out there, a lot of tradition, a lot of history, especially in the Celtic regions, Ireland, Scotland, England, and the like. Tell us what drew your interest there. Is that part of your heritage, or?
Well, yeah. I mean, it's literally, my mother's name was Mary Kathleen Connolly McKern, and McKern was my birth name. And
that's pretty Irish.
Yeah, it's pretty Irish. Although don't tell anybody, Daniel, but we're Orange Irish all the way back to the 1700s.
Oh, my goodness.
We're Protestant, so I have to kind of keep a little low profile there.
Oh, we honor it all here on the program.
They don't care anymore. They don't. You know, as soon as I say I'm minister from the States, they know I'm not. Anyway, she always wanted to go to Ireland, and she never went. She was so proud of being Irish. And I just happened to make a deathbed wish, come true, that I'll go someday, and I'll take something of you with me. Well, she passed, and the following year, my husband and I had free air miles, and so we went to Ireland in late October, early November. Interesting weather time to go. And I had a lock of her beautiful white hair. Now, keep in mind, I had already been doing ceremonies. I was doing moon ceremonies for women. I was doing all this kind of woo-woo stuff. And we went into a place called Newgrange. Have you heard of this?
No.
It's about an hour's drive north of Dublin, and it's where it's over 5,000 years old, like a ritual site. They thought it was a burial tomb, but it was more of a ritual site, where the light at the winter solstice precisely comes in a tiny little box and goes down a very, very narrow passageway and illuminates the central tomb, where they found bones and relics of people over 5,000 years ago. Well, I go in there, and and in front of it is this massive stone with a triple spiral etched into it. And I had always been fascinated by spirals, and especially that triple spiral of three coming together. I'm getting goosebumps even as I'm remembering this. So as we walked, edged in between these stones into this long passageway, something in me started to shake. We were in the center. I felt tears coming. I felt like I had been there before. And, I've been to places on the planet where I thought, I'm going to have a mystical experience here, and nothing happened. I wasn't looking for it, and it happened. The rest of that trip, I kept running into people that we did some ceremonies with some kind of wild hippie pagans and that kind of stuff. But everybody said, so how long have you been a priestess? I said, no, I was a minister. Well, you're doing Celtic ceremonies and moon ceremonies, you're a priestess. And I said, no, I'm a minister. So I came back to Portland going, wow, what's a priestess? That's a pretty potent word. And so I started working with that word, and it was not easy. That's an archetype, right? I mean, when I say priestess to you, what comes to mind?
Well, priestess to me sounds like someone who has the power and the responsibility to, sort of not necessarily be a watchman, but just being responsible for action. To me.
Beautiful. Yeah. And see how this all feeds into what we're talking about today. Yeah, so I did a lot of looking at the difference between minister and priestess. Now, priestess, you look it up, it'll say like the woman who leads ceremonies or rituals or something like that. Now, it's closely associated with witch, which, by the way, only means wise woman. So that's a whole other dialogue someday. And so I started working with it, and I found the difference for me that as a minister, licensed and ordained and studied minister, that it means to serve. See, I always go to the definition of a word. That's really important, is go to the origin of the word, because if you choose a word, you're choosing the origin of it, how it's been used, all right? So,
and the energy of it as well.
Exactly. And so I looked up minister, and it means to be of service. And what I realized, there were times as a minister and I was the minister of a church for a few years, but there were times, Daniel, where I felt like I don't want to reach out to that person. And I thought maybe I was bad or, what's wrong with me as a minister? Well, then I start working with the archetype of priestess. And the priestess, okay, so minister, we surrender our will to the higher power, to what's happening. A priestess learns how to use her will.
Yes, exactly.
Exactly. So I started to use it as, again, another place where I can discern, is this a moment, is the minister being called to come forward right now, or the priestess? And, because I can use minister as a way to just weasel my way into your life and help fix you, And then I can. Watch out for me. But to be able to go, okay, so God gave us free will. How am I going to learn to use that will? So I see it as two sides, of being able to surrender my will in this moment, or am I to use my will in this moment? And I better be using it in right, as I said, divine right action, because the metaphysical principle is it will come back to you tenfold. Mm-hmm. So it has helped me so much all these years of, okay, what is mine to do in this moment? And this past year, am I supposed to take an action with this? And by having the word, Daniel, I can stop. It stops me to go, all right, so what is being asked of me in this moment? They want me to come over there, talk to their angry teenager or whatever. Am I going to rescue or intervene, or am I going to politely say, you need to work this out?
Right.
And so it's the language of it has helped me greatly. So anyway, then people start saying, go to Ireland and take us with you. And I went, leading a tour would be just a nightmare. And then I had somebody in 2002 co-lead with me and to take people to many of these sites. Now, again, these are thousands of years old. These were not Celtic people, Daniel, that built these sites. And I'm also cautious with my groups that let's not over-romanticize what they did in the center of. There were probably sacrifices. There were probably violent sexual acts or sacrificing a child. I mean, we don't know what they did. Let's not romanticize it, but now we can bring our light to that site. And there is just, I'll tell you, I've taken well over 100 people to Ireland, and every single person comes back and goes, oh, my God, I'm changed. And sometimes they can name it, and sometimes they can't. But we start the tour with an intention. Mm-hmm. I have them write it down. What is your intention? And then one of the first places we go, a stone circle or something, is we verbalize it. I give them a little object to hold while they're on the trip. And then at any time on the trip, if they want to come talk to me about, oh, wow, the stone just talked to me, and, But at the end of it, then we do a closing ritual. We revisit the intention, and then you go, oh, wow, and this is how it showed up. Mm-hmm. And sometimes it's not what we thought, but it is in alignment with the intention. Remember, the aim that guides the action.
Right. Kathleen, it's interesting when you talk about the fact that you took these people over to Ireland. They all felt change, whether they could name it or they couldn't. And you take a look at the new year, and the idea behind the resolution is to change an aspect or maybe a lot of things about ourselves within the next year that we seem to be unhappy with. And it occurs to me a lot of times that the reason perhaps people don't get that goal met, whether it's quitting smoking, building wealth, whether it's losing weight, better relationships, whatever it is perhaps they're just not that unhappy or that uncomfortable with what it is they want to change in the first place.
Oh, yeah. See, there's comfort in what we know.
Right.
Which is why we often relapse and go back into, oh, screw it, And this is where I use also, Daniel, I use all of the month of January to come up with your word.
So we don't need to come up with it right away. Just feel what comes to you and take 30 days or the month of January to do that. What makes January significant? Not just because it's the beginning of the calendar year, but...
Well, I, a few years ago, looked up what is the meaning of the word January, and it's named after the Roman god Janus, Janus, and he is depicted as having two faces, the same face on the front of his head and the same face on the back of his head.
Well, how about that?
So he was neither in the old year nor was he in the new year. It said that marriages were not made, business was not done. I mean, January is usually the most fallow time of the year in the northern hemisphere. This would be the opposite in the southern hemisphere. So we use that time to just be with the soil, because we know spring is going to come. We pretty much do. In fact, the calendar, I was looking this up the other day, was only 10 months until about 700 BC. And that's when somebody came along and put 2 more months in and named it January, and then we added February. But isn't it interesting they didn't include the 2 darkest months of the year? They had those months, but they didn't name them. So, and with the Celtic people, which probably predates them as well, in between spaces are magical and mystical, but can also hold negative energy. So doorways are holy and sacred. I tell my groups this when we walk into a sacred site: step over the threshold, not on it. And just notice the difference. And so January is like that threshold, okay? And so I'm not done with 2013, even though I turned the page, but I'm not quite into 2014 yet either. So what a relief to give ourselves the month of January to set our goals and then the intention that's going to support it, rather than, oh, my God, it's New Year's Eve. Some of my friends write something down and they want to release and they throw it in the fire, and then they all whoop-de-doo. And, we have good friends that we spend New Year's Eve with every year, and what we do is we create our top 10 list. These are the 10 best things that happened to me last year. And invariably things will come out that, something sad happened, but this was so significant that it goes on my top 10 list. So that's our way of going back and visiting, of remembering 2013, and also to be witnessed by other people, people you trust. And actually that part is what I discovered in a book a number of years ago, a book called Celebrate the Solstice. There was a passage in there called New Year's Rites of Renewal. And shall I go into that?
Please.
So what this fellow was talking about, I can't remember his name, but he had studied New Year's rituals for cultures all over the world. Now, it might be the New Year. It might be the start of a marriage, right, or the birth of a child. These are all new things that happen. And he identified 4 steps that are absolutely necessary in order to fully be in that newness. And these are 4 easy steps, and if you give out my website or whatever, people can get a hold of me. But they're really pretty simple. I'm going to say the words he uses, and then I'll talk us through because they're kind of weird words. So the 4 steps, you have to go through mortification, then purgation, then invigoration, and then jubilation. So obviously what we want to do on New Year's is jubilate, right?
Right.
Oh, we went outside, we banged pans, we did sparklers, and we woohooed and all that stuff. And most people think that's how they're going to go into the new year. And how soon are we let down by that?
Of course.
Especially all the holidays and the whoop-de-doos, and then we get let down by that. So these 4 steps are then, so mortification, kind of a weird word, huh? But when you look up the meaning of it, one of the meanings of it is in pathology, mortification is the death or decay of one part of the living body. Okay? So I use that word, he uses that word, but I go on to explain it, that what is this one thing you're going to let go from last year? Because this is where I think we get into trouble too, Daniel. Oh, I'm not going to smoke again. I'm not going to do that again. I'm not going to speed. I'm not going to, I'll call my grandmother every Sunday. There are too many. Just one. Just one thing last year. If you let go of that, how would you be changed for the new year? Mm-hmm. So we have to call in our story. So what I do with my groups and my clients is I give them a list of the last 10 years, and they have to, the last year. And we start with December of 2013, then back to November. And then each month, on the right side, you write down your happy memories, shall we say, and on the left side of the chart, you write down your unhappy memories. But often they go, back and forth. So you start to call in your stories. I always say it's like, if I'm going to make a big pot of soup, I'm going to call in some carrots. Ooh, I might put some cauliflower in it. So we're calling in our stories from the last year. but I have my clients go back to the last 10 years, the last decade of your life, and what is the pattern that you want to release. Okay, so let's go back to my word allow that year. I can't remember what I released, but in my mind right now I'm thinking resistance or maybe invisibility. Because when my weight is up, I want to be invisible. Or, we all have our own version of that. So I have them do this process. I mean, they sit for an hour and a half silently, journaling, walking around, meditating of, this and this and this and this. And then so they identify that one thing. Now, by identifying it, ritual requires action. And so the next station is purgation, which means we purge it. You have to do something to get rid of it. Have you ever done a releasing ceremony?
Not really that I can say. I've been involved in ceremonies, but I don't think not anything where I've released something.
Yeah, I do it a lot. It's by definition, purgation is a ceremonial cleansing. You're purging something that no longer serves you. Okay, so there are many ways to do it. To do a releasing ceremonies, I always call upon the 4 elements. All right, so we can burn something. We can write it on a piece of paper and burn it, and then give the ashes to the wind. There's your element of air. You can give it to the wind. There's a tradition in the British Isles. I think they're called like kutis, K-U something I-E-S. And they're little tiny prayer strips of cotton. They call them prayer rags or something like that. So you can write on it or just rub it in your hand or breathe into into the cloth what you want to release. And then you just loosely tie it to a tree somewhere, and it will eventually be in a bird's nest in Africa or something. But you take a ritual action to get it off you and out of you. I have this really cool stuff called flash paper. Do you know what that is?
It's paper that when you light it just flashes?
Yeah, it just goes poof. Magicians use it a lot. So we do that because, letting go is a process, but it's also a moment. Mm-hmm. It really is just a moment. But we're the ones who make the work out of it, right? Another one we do often is to take a stone and maybe paint a symbol on it and then toss it into the water somewhere. I've had people, I did this once at the coast. I with a stick, wrote the word fear into the sand. And I thought, this is going to be really cool. I'm going to watch the tide take it out. I'm watching the tide because I've been doing some work on irrational fears because, remember, fear does serve us, but irrational fears do not serve me. Well, do you know how long it takes for the tide to go out? Long.
Quite a while.
Yeah, I know. And so I thought, wow, there's meaning in that, too. I just wanted all my fear to go away. It's a process. And so I put a spiral then from kind of like an umbilical cord from my word fear spiraling out into the tide there. And it took over an hour, but the next wave, it took the entire word away. So even though it was like this long process, the word fear didn't disappear in little pieces. One wave came in and took the whole thing out. And that's what I mean by it is a process and it is a moment. Mm-hmm. Okay? Does that make sense with purgation?
It does. Completely.
And I've done, here's something else you can use. I've used pieces of string or hemp, something like that, and you tie a knot in it for each thing that disrupted your life last year. It can be a person, a situation, whatever. And then you can burn that, but it's biodegradable. You can also throw that into the ocean or to bury it. So there are infinite amount of ways to purge, to let go. But now here's the trick. The next step is invigoration, and that can only happen by sitting in the void. See, we want to go from, okay, this is what I want to release. I just released it. Now let's go party. We as humans, I think, are uncomfortable with sitting in the void. So what that third step is about is actually sitting in like neutral energy. Something is gestating. Sitting in the void between letting go of something and welcoming something new is just being able to sit in the void. So this is where we meditate. Sometimes I do a 20, 30-minute chakra meditation so we get out of our heads and into our bodies. Because once we've released something, we've created an opening, and nature abhors a vacuum, right?
Mm-hmm.
And how easy it is for whatever to sneak back in. So we give ourselves that time to just sit in the nothingness of that. Don't jump ahead. Don't go back. Just sit in this present moment. And then in that invigoration is where we start to look at the words. That's when I then start giving them pieces of paper, lists of words. I give them some examples of words that have worked in the past or what other people have used. And then we finally get a party, okay? After we've done all that, we finally get a party. And we do it. We get silly. I have sparkling water. We wear hats. I tell them to bring makeup. And then we our word for the year is then we write it on a little piece of paper, and then we make an arrow. I use skewers, long bamboo skewers if you're going to barbecue.
Right.
And then I have all this craft stuff with that you can glue and tape and blah, blah. And so everybody makes their arrow. Remember my story.
Right.
He shot the arrow, then he drew the target around it. Well, I'm my desk outside the room where I am right now. I've got 4 or 5 of those arrows sitting next to my desk in a container. And, every time I look at them, may not be often, but when I do, I remember. That was the word. That's how it served me. And then that encourages me and gives me more support in continuing the practice, because it really is a marvelous practice.
It sounds like a lot of fun.
Friends all over Facebook the last few days have been going, do you have your word? Do you have your word? What's my word? And I'm going, you have all of January.
Yes, this is only the 3rd or 4th day.
It's early January.
I'm curious, when you do this, is it better to do by yourself, or is it better to do with a group of people?
Well, you can do it by yourself, but there is a power in being witnessed, silently witnessed.
Mm-hmm.
When I started doing weddings 20-some years ago, part of my ministry studies is we had to go to weddings and just watch them, like people we didn't know, to partner with a minister. And I thought, wow, the minister and the bride and groom are just up there going blah, 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 blah. Who are these attendants? Who are these people out in the audience? What's going on here? And same thing with the funeral. My dad died like 25 years ago, and I'm from Iowa. And back then at the funeral home, my family sat behind a curtain, Daniel. And I told my mom before she died, I said, I'm not sitting behind a curtain. I'm in the front row. I'm going to celebrate your life. Mm-hmm. And I think we're coming more to those type of rituals. So what I have done with weddings is I say to the attendant, well, after welcoming and, marriage is all these good stuff, then I have the bride and groom turn and face the audience. I say, take a good look here. And your clans are here. And this marriage here today creates a union of clans as well. So I turn to the bride's family and say something, and then I say, and today will you open your circle of love to include him? And I say, please answer yes if you agree. And it's usually kind of fun. They kind of go, whoa! And then I turn to the bride's family, will you open your circle of love and now include him, or however I said that. And then I turn to the attendants, and I say, you're here for a very ancient reason. A godparent, witnesses at a wedding were the ones that were committed to help you stay on your path, the one that the couple could go to when they were in trouble or concerned about their marriage. And then I say to them, are you willing to continue witnessing and celebrating and supporting them? And answer yes if you agree. And what I hear after my weddings, I don't do many anymore, but when I do, people are like, oh, and then I turn to the audience. I'm saying, hey, you folks, you are here for a big reason as well. And are you willing to support? And they're, yeah. And so everybody's involved. So that's what I mean by the power of a witness. It's not just to party and look pretty. It's to have somebody, you know what it feels like, don't you, Daniel?
Sure.
When something's on your heart and you need to go talk to somebody about it. And it's the Anam Cara, it's the soul friend, and it's the one that will listen. And if you want my advice or my opinion, you can ask for it, but I'm just going to witness you. And what a gift that is to people. So, yes, you can do these ceremonies by yourself. I think there is a greater power when we're witnessed. Now, if you are alone, I encourage people to say things out loud. So, if I'm going up to burn this piece of paper of resistance or fear or whatever, I have my clients say it out loud. I now release the old attachment to fear or something like that. So if you are alone and doing a ritual, I encourage you to say, I pray out loud every morning. I do it out loud partly because then I know I've done it. Because the mind, as you said, is a very tricky thing. Did I think about meditating or did I really meditate this morning? Did I think I released that or did I really release that? So, yeah, I think it's important to be witnessed. And it's fun to do in a small group. I would do it in a small group. And definitely where you'd be trusted and no one's going to butt in and say, well, that's stupid, or, that they're really going to support each other.
Mm-hmm. I can see, too, how doing it in a group, what I've noticed when you go to these group things, and preferably, they go for longer than a day, is you start creating a very unique connection with the other people that, you can be in another state, in another room, but you connect immediately because there's that moment that brought you together.
Well, and that's the name of my ministry, Anamkara Connections. It's how can we connect at the soul level as friends. My husband and I do on our anniversary. We were married on the winter solstice 19 years ago, and we wanted to get married on the darkest day of the year, but it's the day that we tip towards the light because we were both well into midlife, and, we have the road behind us, so we're not going to ignore that. But for every year, for 19 years, we did it again this year, we go out to dinner. Sometimes we spend the night somewhere, and we make a list of the 10 best things that happened to us as a couple in the last year. And this came about a few years ago, well, maybe 10, 12 years ago, the first time we started to do that, and we were both like, I know what happened in my life and your life, but what happened in our life? So it was a wake-up call to, we tend to me, we tend to him, but who's tending to our marriage? That we have to keep all those 3 candles lit, So then after we do that, and we have a blast doing that, like, oh, remember that dinner, we did that, and even sad things sometimes. A few years ago, my stepdaughter almost died in a car accident, and it was a very rough 16 days of life and death. And we put it on the list that year because it drew us as an extended step family closer together, And then after we do that, we, as a couple, set intentions for the year ahead. So one year we said, let's take ballroom dancing lessons. One year we had, let's go to the opera because neither one of us had been to the opera. And so we try to find fun things like that. And you know what? We put the list away. We put it away. And then when we pull it out the next year going, oh, look at all those things we did. Well, we never did that. But it's the dialogue about our union. And so I even use my poor husband. He has to go through all these rituals. Do you remember when Orville Redenbacher died years ago, and our kids were little, and they came down for breakfast, and I had popcorn. They went, we're having popcorn for breakfast? So I said, Orville Redenbacher died. And they were like, oh. And you know what? We talked about what we liked about his popcorn. I'm the queen of ritual, they say.
Now, tell us, I know it's early in the year, but do you have an idea what the word of intention for 2014 could be good for, let's say, collectively all of us?
Well, I'm playing on this one this year. Can I read you my list from the last
Sure, absolutely.
I'll read you. I won't go into them, but I'll read you. So I started this in 2001, and my word was aliveness. Then the next year it was visibility, and then allowing. In 2004 it was co-arising, and now I was minister of a church. So my word for that year was co-arising. We're all going to rise together. And, of course, we got to look at the things that didn't rise together. Then liberation. In 2006, my word was vision. That's when I left the church job and started getting back into my ritual work. Then it was presence, not with a T, but with a C-E. And then 2008 was trust. 2009, connection. That was the year I started the nonprofit. 2010 was focus. Oh, man, that's a good one for idea people. Focus. And then 2011 was grace. I love that word. And 2012 was confidence. And then this last year has been action. So this year I'm playing with the word value, V-A-L-U-E. What, it's been years, Daniel, since I've really sat down and looked at what are my personal core values, what is the core value of my marriage, and also I will get the opportunity to look at when I undervalue myself or someone else.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm playing with that, and I always say it's kind of like clothes shopping or something, or shoe shopping. Just try on the word. And then this early in the game, I start tuning into when I hear the word. It's like, oh, he just said value. Oh, that store is called Real Value, or the word will talk to us. Okay. The year I was looking at the word allow, I was in yoga one day, and we were at the end of it. We were on our backs, kind of bottom up against the wall, legs up, kind of right angle, And then the yoga teacher puts a sandbag on our feet, and that helps ground the femur into the pelvis. And I've always had a story in my life that I have kind of short, stocky legs. And I heard my yoga teacher say, and now just allow your legs to be heavy. And I almost burst out laughing, going, what would my life be like if I just allowed it? I can't hide them. I can't cover them up. They're just my legs, Mm-hmm. And so I tune into how that word comes to me. How often do I hear it? What might you have a word for the year, Daniel?
Until I was with you today, I never even thought about it this way before, but it's pretty interesting to say the least.
I think I might have to call you back in a few, on February 1st and check up on you.
That'd be a good idea. I like the idea of intention as the way that you're sharing it, just as I was describing the story earlier about the affirmation, where you ask yourself the question rather than making a statement.
Yeah.
And it really puts a twist into helping you understand the power of words, the energy of words, and just how powerful they are when they're in your thoughts, which are the real things that motivate and drive all of your actions for the most part anyway.
Absolutely. And, when you're around friends who do this similar type of practice, it's kind of funny how we'll call each other on it and go, are you undervaluing yourself?
Mm-hmm.
And part of with the word value is I have a nonprofit called Anamkara Connections, and then my for-profit is called Anamkara Tours. And like many of us in spiritual offerings, it's difficult sometimes to put a price tag on something. But my business side, I have no problem putting a price tag on a tour to Ireland. But on the nonprofit side, I tend to undervalue myself. And minister does mean to be of service. I'll never turn anybody away because of money, but I have given myself away way too much. My husband will point this out, going, you have just put in a 14-hour day. Did any money come? And I'm like, no.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not, it's the energy, not the money, it's the energy. So that's why I'm looking at how the word value might help me, find the right price point for Ireland tours, but also the right price point for a wedding, or if someone wants to mentor with me, or the price of the book for my clients. It's at this point, it's for my clients. So that's how I'm thinking it might support me. And we'll see how that goes.
Exactly. Be an interesting year for you this year when it comes to value, won't it?
Yeah, won't it? And am I getting the value for my money? Yeah.
So your websites are AnamKaraConnections.com. That's your nonprofit. And then Anamkara Tours. That's CARA Tours.com as well.
Right.
Very good.
Yeah, Anam in Irish is soul, and Kara is friend. So it's soul friends.
Well, Kathleen, what a pleasure to have you bring the insight that you have about intention. That should definitely cause our listeners a little more focus about what their New Year's should bring to them.
Yeah, it's a different way to do it, isn't it?
It really is. It's really fascinating.
And I've done it so many years now, I know it works.
I'm sure. I can already tell it works just when you were sharing that with me. So.
Okay.
Interesting stuff. Kathleen, thank you again so much for joining us here on the program today.
You bet. Happy New Year to you, Daniel.
And Happy New Year to you.
All right. Bye-bye.
We want to thank the listeners out there for tuning in this new year. Be sure to visit us at beyond50radio.com. That is the number 50. And sign up for Beyond 50's exclusive updates. That's right up there for you and available online. I'm Daniel Davis. Thank you for joining us. This is the Beyond 50 radio program. And remember, live your day past halfway.